Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Charlie. I don't know why the Bulgarians are getting picked on. At least their ad market's growing, so to the Bulgarian contingent. So yes, let me firstly just recommend the Westin Excelsior's Bloody Mary. It's very good. Secondly, let me just introduce and tell you a little bit about. I think you're probably finding out a bit about Mike Murphy right now. But let me tell you a little bit about Mike Murphy. He's the Vice President of Global Sales at Facebook. He leads the media strategy, advertising sales, account management, and advertising operations there. He was previously the head of sales for the Western region in the States for Yahoo. Also got an entrepreneurial background. He founded a company called Tag that provided sales, marketing, and business development services to established and startup technology companies. Mike began his career at Ziff Davis Publishing. I believe he also did a stint at CMP Media. As his Facebook page tells us, he's into Green Day, DMB, and Matchbox 20. His favorite shows are Scrubs, The Wire, Entourage, Sopranos. Pretty impeccable taste. But I think my favorite thing was his quotes, because most people, choose some rather pretentious Winston Churchill number. Mike goes with his favorite quote, comes from a 3-year-old called James Murphy, asking the very pertinent question, why do people have butts? Actually, I don't think he said why do, I think it was why people have butts. That's exactly so I'd like to start with that, Mike.
Good start.
Why people have butts, Mike? Now, I actually think we'd like to start by throwing it out to the audience. You've probably noticed you've all got a little polling device there. So I think we want to find out whether you're social network users and indeed which social network you use. So if we can have the first question up there. Can we have the first question up there? We can. There you go. It's quite simple. The number corresponds to one of those. Oh, yep, some music. Interesting. So AOL paid $850 million per Bebo user in this audience. we can deduce from that. No, Mike, is that the kind of result you would have expected there? 35%? What do you see if you ask that question in the US?
I think it's fairly representative of the European market. I think in the US and in Canada and the UK, if we were speaking specifically to those markets, I would expect that the number would be higher, especially in the advertising agency community. What we've seen in many agencies is that our penetration is 90% or so in those markets.
Does that worry you, though, that your penetration is 90%? I mean, when old bastards like me are becoming Facebook users, is that a sign that it's kind of like it's no longer going to be as trendy with that kind of core audience that it started out with of younger people?
Yeah, Mark made some in the first 3 weeks that the company existed, Mark Zuckerberg, who is our 23-year-old chairman, CEO, and founder, and he just happens to be my boss's boss, founded this company in 2003. And what he did, he made a couple of key decisions in the first couple of weeks that the company existed. The first was when he started at Harvard University, he made it so that users needed to authenticate into Facebook, and at the time it was only Harvard's Facebook. So they needed to authenticate through an email address, and 3 weeks later, when 82% of Harvard students had signed up, and he opened it up to 10 other schools, he made another really key decision in that you had to authenticate in through your own network. So the next 10 schools that we created Facebook for had to authenticate into their own networks. And why that's important is that users now have 60,000 networks instead of one big vast social network that most social media sites are to authenticate into. And what that means for my 4 sons is when they're old enough to have a Facebook profile, they can ignore me just like many of your kids ignore you on your Facebook profile as well.
So it's not, the idea being that it's really not a mass, I'm part of Facebook, it's actually I'm part of the New York network on Facebook, or I'm part of my church group, I'm part of my magazine's audience?
Yeah, the way it works is that on average, users on Facebook don't have any more access than 0.5% to our entire audience, which is really different from most social media sites where every user has access to every other user's profile.
And I mean, talk a little bit about why so many people. Well, actually, first of all, I mean, tell us how big is your user base today? Talk a little bit about the size of your user base and compared to MySpace.
We're over 70 million unique users on a monthly basis. And why that's important is that we're only counting active users who have been active and on the site in the last 30 days. And how that compares to MySpace, I really don't know. But the significance of the number is more so about where that number is coming from. It wasn't too long ago, in 2006, when we opened up the network to everybody. At the time we opened up the network, 90% of our users were in college and in the US. And right now we have significantly more users that are out of school, and more than 50% of our users are now international. So we're seeing a significant shift in the makeup and breakdown of our users.
Can you be any more specific than that? Do you do specific sort of demographics? Have you seen, is there an age shift that you've actually charted?
There really is. I mean, the fastest growing demographic for Facebook is 25 plus, which is back to your earlier question, is that a concern? And we're actually very excited to see, breaking out of the 18 to 24-year-old audience, although it's really important to us. We believed a long time ago that people over 25 needed to communicate with their friends too, and we wanted to create an environment that enabled them to do that.
And talk a little bit about, you talking a lot about growth there, but we have seen in certain markets, the UK for example, growth finally leveled off. I think February, your numbers were actually down about 5%. Does that mean you are starting to hit that plateau? I mean, we've seen it with almost all those kind of, I mean, we definitely saw it with MySpace sort of middle of last year where they really hit that plateau. Are you worried that you're already arriving at that point?
Well, no, because we measure our own users because we obviously have access to the data on a regular basis, and our internal data shows that we actually grew during that period. Some of the third-party tracking sites, as some people in this room probably have issues with some as well.
It was the measurement companies.
Well, no, but I mean, there's seasonality there.
If
there's
we're down, it's their fault.
There's the methodology. Yeah.
You've
Sorry,
only had one sip.
The changes that occur in the seasonality. We've seen seasonality around the holidays in the past, but our internal numbers show that we continue to grow.
So you don't fear the plateau. Do you fear the fad factor, though? I mean, the whole thing about the internet. I mean, the wonderful thing about how quickly a Facebook can get created, and how the barriers to entry are so low. Someone else can surely come along tomorrow. If you even charge a cent for that site for each user, someone else can come along and do it free, or someone else can come along and offer something that's sort of more suited to a particular niche. Do you fear that fad factor?
Well, we know we're not the first social networking site that existed. We're not the first social media site that existed, and we've learned a lot along the way. As far as the niche sites, I think there are absolutely going to be a need for niche sites as you go forward. There's going to be great opportunities for those sites to spring up and to grow big. One of the big changes that we made last year is when in May of 2007 we opened up our network to third-party developers around the world, and right now we have over 200,000 developers who are developing on the Facebook platform. And what we believe is that it's created a great opportunity for developers around the world to get instant distribution of a significant audience. So those that were back sitting trying to figure out how to create the next social network, in many cases are leveraging the platform that we've created for them that enable them to get pretty immediate distribution. We have now about 20,000 applications on the site. We've built some of the biggest websites in the world in the last year and a half because of the distribution that happens on the Facebook platform. So we're fairly convinced that there are a couple of guys sitting in a dorm room right now trying to figure things out. We're just as convinced that we've built an infrastructure and an application platform that will allow those developers to develop for Facebook as opposed to competing for Facebook against Facebook.
I mean, that's obviously an element of you being open source there, and I'm sure. What can a developer like the developers behind Scrabulous, for example, what can they hope to get from that?
That's a great question. The Scrabulous is an application that users around Facebook, in many cases, are addicted to and have fallen in love with. It's a Scrabble application that allows you to play Scrabble against and challenge friends that you have on the network. It's two developers, fairly young guys in India, that developed this application, launched it, and it's been a wild success. I mean, in fact, they've had several fairly substantial bids to buy the application from them. They've created some issues with some of the content holders along the way. But as far as the way that they can leverage this opportunity and then monetize those, the developers on our platform have what we call a canvas page. So it's all of the page inside of the frame, and they can monetize those on their own. So we don't charge a toll, so there's no toll booth sitting in front of the applications. We create distribution for the developers. And what we get in return for that is just a more robust site that can engage users, more than we could with the 8 applications that we developed on our own.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're obviously going to come on to the key question of monetization. Just we don't charge a toll for that. In fact, we don't charge for anything. But I do want to just kind of talk about that open source thing a little bit more, because you've obviously opened up the site to developers. You've got those 20,000 different applications already on there. But there has been criticism that from a user's point of view, you're not totally open source. I can't port my friends to another site. I can't port them to a contact database. Things like that. Is that something you feel is going to have to evolve if you're going to stay the kind of the leading social network?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a misconception that Facebook is a closed environment. In fact, we don't look at ourselves as a walled garden in any way. We look at ourselves as a very open company because we're the first to open our platform, within the social media space to others. We do believe that portability of your profile is something that's going to happen soon, and we're actually supportive of it. We sit on the board that's putting the strategy together around that, and we truly believe that portability of your identity online is going to be an important thing in either 08 or 09.